MacArthur actually begins this chapter by quoting Micah, the prophet Micah, or Micah chapter 6, verse 4. For I brought you up from the land of Egypt, I redeemed you from the house of bondage, and I sent before you Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. And he starts out talking about the forms of the name Miriam. He says, according to census data, the most common girl's name in the United States has historically been Mary. In fact, forms of Mary or Maria comprise the most popular girl's name in the Western world. This is due, of course, to the spiritual legacy of Jesus' mother, Mary. But Mary is the Greek rendering. Her Greek name is actually Miriam. Miriam. That's what you'll see if you open your Greek text. It will be Miriam, not M-A-R-Y. But you understand how those are anglicized and made into English and so forth. And Miriam, Jesus' mother Miriam, her Old Testament namesake, was Moses' sister Miriam, a woman who was used by God also in a unique and noteworthy way. So a couple of important things here. As I said last time, a new Pharaoh arose who did not know the story of Joseph and what he had done for the Jews. The Jews are overpopulating or populating too much. They're growing in numbers, and that's just too much for the new Pharaoh. And so he comes up with this crafty plan to get rid of all the male Jewish boys when they're born, okay? Moses' parents make this basket, cover it with waterproof tar or whatever, and put him out in the river among the reeds, and sends their young girl, would be Moses' older sister, to watch him to see what happens. She was herself being prepared to see how God was going to rescue the Jews and save them and bring deliverance. So at the riverside, this is where our heroine, Miriam, enters the story. Page 47, as a young girl and the daughter of slaves, Miriam was certainly an unlikely hero, hence the name of this book, 12 Unlikely Heroes. Yes, she played a vital role in the life of her baby brother at this critical time in his life when he was only 3 months old. We don't know exactly how old Miriam was at the time, yet God used her in a crucial way to accomplish his purposes for her brother and ultimately for the nation of Israel, and this is only the beginning of her amazing story, end quote. He goes on to say that Pharaoh's daughter, that it could have been Hatshepsut, who would eventually become Pharaoh herself and one of Egypt's most famous female rulers. At any rate, this is the princess who came down and to bathe in the river and found the baby, and Miriam pipes up and says, she bravely shows herself and pipes up and says, would you like me to go find you a Jewish nursemaid to comfort the baby? And so the Pharaoh's daughter agrees, the princess agrees, and she goes and gets their mother, her and Moses' mother. And when Moses was grown and became a young man, he's basically adopted by the Pharaoh, the princess of Egypt. So he learns and is educated. Acts 7:2 says he's educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Acts 7:22. MacArthur says at the very beginning of Moses' life, the Lord used his older sister Miriam in a specific way to watch over him and bring him safely back home. In her willingness to bravely approach Pharaoh's daughter, Miriam played a strategic role in her baby brother's return to his family. She was emboldened by the faith she had seen in her parents and which she herself possessed. Moreover, in watching the Lord rescue Moses from the Nile River, Miriam herself was being prepared for the day when she would see God deliver her people from their bondage in Egypt. End quote. And so over the years, she shared family life with Moses in the early years, at any rate. And I'm sure she watched as she saw him become a young man and a leader in the land of Egypt. As you know, Moses kills a man when he's 40 years old, and then he flees and he's gone for another 40. So when he's 80 years old, he returns to the land because in the providence of God, it's time for him to lead the Jews out of slavery in Egypt. So he rises to prominence again. So for 80 years, so this means Miriam is in her 80s at least. She's past 80 for sure. And so she's certainly an adult, right? And she watches as God uses her brother to deliver the people and be the leader for the people. In Exodus 15, when you get there, you have, after the 10 plagues, and Pharaoh lets the Jews go. They're at the edge of the Red Sea, and God parts the waters because Pharaoh and his army are pursuing them. Exodus 14, verse 30. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. When Israel saw the great power which the Lord had used against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. Then Moses and the sons of Israel sang this song to the Lord and said, I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and his rider he has hurled into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will extol him. The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has cast into the sea, and the choices of his officers are drowned in the Red Sea. The deep covers them. They went down into to the depths like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, is majestic in power. Okay, so it's a praise. It's a hymn. They're worshiping on the seashore. Mind you, Israel did not have weapons, nor were they trained warriors. In fact, God did this. In fact, back in chapter 14, verse 13 and 14, Moses said, do not fear, stand by and see the salvation of the Lord. Stand by and see what God will do and what God is capable of doing. So this hymn in Exodus 15 is referred to as the Song of Moses. In the middle of page 56 of MacArthur's book, 12 Unlikely Heroes, he says, quote, in response to Moses' hymn, Miriam led the women of Israel in a joyous refrain of praise. Exodus 15, 20-21 summarizes her joyful response with these words, end quote. So if you look at Exodus 15, verse 20, Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took the timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dancing. Miriam answered them, sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and his rider he has hurled into the sea. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. Then they came to the wilderness of Marah, right? And they began grumbling then to God's man, God's leader, Moses. And you know that God has to discipline them throughout their journeys. He begins leading them around in circles instead of going ahead and leading them up to their promised land. They wander around for 40 years or so in the desert, literally in circles almost. And that's because of their hard-heartedness and hard-headedness, not trusting God. They just really weren't spiritually ready for what God had in store for them. Later, they needed some discipline and some training. And so that's what's going to happen. Matter of fact, Miriam herself, MacArthur has this chapter, this section, page 57, weakness in the wilderness. Weakness in the wilderness. So there's the issue of Moses getting mad and striking the rock, because the people keep complaining. Then there's the issue where the Amalekites attack Israel at the end of 17, 11, and 12. So it came about when Moses held his hand up that Israel prevailed. When he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. Y'all know the story of him holding his hands up and for the people to fight. And it was a sign of encouragement for them. At any rate, Moses' hands were heavy. They took a stone and put under him, and he sat on it, and Aaron and Hur supported his hands. He was holding up his staff, that walking stick thing, and his hands were getting tired. MacArthur has on page 58 that Aaron and Hur, right? Aaron's his brother on one side, Hur on the other. But he says, we have already noted that according to Josephus, Hur was Miriam's husband. That would mean that Moses' hands were supported by his brother Aaron on the one side and by his brother-in-law Hur on the other. All this took place in the first 2 months of their journey out of Egypt, before they even got to Mount Sinai. MacArthur says also, if indeed Miriam was Hur's wife, that we do know that Bezalel, who would be the craftsman for the main engineer or artisan for the tabernacle, Bezalel was Hur's grandson, so possibly then Miriam's grandson. Interestingly, page 59 is the heart of this thing, I think. He says, quote, as members of Moses' family, Miriam and Aaron would have constantly been exposed to the complaints of the people. Okay? They would have, and the people were constantly complaining against God, but since they can't touch God or hurt God, they complain against his representative, which here in this theocracy was Moses. Aaron even blamed the mobbing crowds for pressuring him into casting the golden calf. Evidently, those voices of protest began to have a poisonous effect on their thinking. Even though they had witnessed God's repeated judgment against those who grumbled, Moses' siblings unexpectedly joined in the dissension and became disloyal to their brother. In Numbers 12, the story of Miriam turns ugly, end quote. So, if we flip over to Numbers 12, then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. This was an Ethiopian woman. Ethiopia was south of Egypt, as you know. Verse 2, and they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us as well? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very humble, more than any man who was on the face of the earth. Suddenly the Lord said to Moses and Aaron and to Miriam, you three come out of the tent of meeting. So the three of them came out. Then the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the doorway of the tent, and he called Aaron and Miriam. When they had both come forward, he said, hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, shall make myself known to him in a vision. I shall speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my household. With him I speak mouth to mouth, even openly, and not in dark sayings, and he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant, against Moses? So the anger of the Lord burned against them, and he departed. But when the cloud had withdrawn from over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous, as white as snow. As Aaron turned toward Miriam, behold, she was leprous. Then Aaron said to Moses, O my Lord, I beg you, do not account this sin to us, in which we have acted foolishly, and in which we have sinned. O do not let her be like one dead, whose flesh is half eaten away when he comes from his mother's womb. Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, O God, heal her, I pray. But the Lord said to Moses, if her father had but spit in her face, would she not bear her shame for 7 days? Let her be shut up for 7 days outside the camp, and afterward she may be received again. So Miriam was shut up outside the camp for 7 days, and the people did not move on until Miriam was received again. Afterward, however, the people moved on from Hazeroth and camped in the wilderness of Paran. That's Numbers 12. So, as MacArthur notes on page 59, in Numbers 12, verse 2, their true motive was exposed, where they said, it was jealousy, where they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Right? He says, quote, out of green envy, they openly challenged Moses' authority, end quote. And so this jealousy that God had chosen Moses to be the leader, to be the primary spokesman, this had made them jealous eventually. And they spoke against it, and God judged them immediately. Miriam became leprous. I mean, that was a horrible disease for her to be immediately stricken with. This was not a light thing. This was heavy-duty punishment and concern, right? Aaron saw that. He was scared immediately. MacArthur says at the bottom of the page, quote, if there had been any question about Moses' position as God's appointed spokesman and leader, it vanished in that instant, end quote. That's for sure. So Moses interceded for his sister. God mercifully healed her, thankfully, and they moved on. In the middle of page 60, MacArthur says the story of Miriam is suspended at the point of her healing, and nothing more is revealed about her until her death. The silence suggests that from this point on, Miriam submissively supported her brother Moses in his God-given role. In a moment of sinful weakness, she had challenged his authority. Perhaps it was hard for her as the older sister who had watched over his cradle to always submit herself to his leadership, but whatever her compulsions, the Lord made it clear what her attitude toward Moses had to be. The implication of the text is that she obeyed, end quote. And then he talks about their death, Miriam and Aaron and Moses' death, and in that order on page 61. Finally, then, her legacy. Well, he mentions some things about the parallels with Mary, the mother of Jesus. Page 62. He says both Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Miriam were connected to great deliverers. Both women watched over these deliverers when they were when the deliverers were infants. Their lives were endangered by wicked kings. Exodus 1, Matthew 2, right? Herod the Great. Actually, there are several parallels between Herod the Great and Pharaoh, actually. That's intense, but that's the case, interestingly enough. And God used both women, Mary and Miriam, in the unfolding of his plan of redemption. Miriam was privileged to look after her baby brother, the one whom God used to redeem Israel from Egypt in a physical sense. Miriam was, and Mary was blessed to give birth to a baby boy, the one who would redeem the world from sin. So he says, quote, Miriam is rightly regarded as a hero, not because of her own greatness, but because she rested in faith on the mighty power of God, end quote. So her legacy, she had been a young slave girl, but trusted God. She was a wife and mother. As an elderly woman, she still helped and ministered to, helped Moses. She led the women, right, in worshiping God. She was a great testimony to them. But she did sin against God, which every one of us do, for sure. God mercifully healed her at that moment of her greatest weakness. She evidently submitted to Moses' authority after this, and so she has been left a great legacy, right? Her namesake of Mary in the Mary, mother of Jesus, being named after Miriam. We'll make one final comment that, with the current culture in America and in Southern Baptist Convention, for instance, you've got this issue of women as pastors, right? The Bible is clear that that pastors were to be husbands of one wife. So women can't be pastors. They can certainly lead in worship and minister to women like Miriam did here, and even minister to the leaders like she did, minister to Moses for years. But we see that when she spoke out against God speaking through him, right? Did God only speak through him? Then that is when she's actually judged at that moment and disciplined for it, her and Aaron. God, from his own sovereign choice and wisdom, God's wisdom, right? Much wiser than us. God, out of his sovereign selection and out of his omniscience and great wisdom, chose Moses to lead the people out of Egypt. So anyway, Miriam is a great example of an imperfect woman who trusted God and loved God and led others to the Lord, and also supported ministry. And she certainly did that for the most part. Okay, so that's Miriam. That's chapter 3 in 12 Unlikely Heroes. Be sure to check out the next video. Chapter 4 on Gideon and Samson are both covered in chapter 4. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Please share my videos with others on your social media. Hope this is an encouragement and a help to you. I'm the Bible Professor.